Testing, B104 testing. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dahlia, this is Elaine. Just wanted to do one last mic check. Can you hear us okay?
Loud and clear. We're good to
Thank
go.
you. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, all. I'm going to call our workshop to order. And I want to thank everybody for being here today. I know workshops are they're so important and they take up a lot of time, so taking time out of your day is just deeply appreciated. I want to note that Vice Chair Lopez is joining remotely pursuant to Government Code Section 54953. And as a reminder, we will immediately convene our special meeting after this workshop. And our goal is going to adjourn the workshop no later than 11:15. So if you start to get the hairy eyeball from me, that is why. Or if I need it from any of you, I will appreciate it. In the unlikely event we need to evacuate, our assembly area is in the parking lot at the corner of North River Oaks across from Starbucks. The nearest AED device is in the main lobby by the security guard, and restrooms, as you may know, are outside the double doors and to the left. And I want to thank all the members of the public who've joined us. I will announce when the board is ready to receive public comment, and we will call on those who are in person first, and then we'll go to Zoom. In-person attendees who want to speak are encouraged to complete a blue speaker card and submit it to our board officers before the item is heard, and the speaker cards are available at the public information table. Virtual attendees, if you can use your raise hand function in Zoom or press 9 if you're dialing in. Colleagues, I'm going to remind you to keep your mics muted until you're ready to speak. And if you want to speak, please it says raise your hand. How sweet. You will text me, raise your hand, or throw something at me. I expect all to happen. All right. Anyway, and if you could mute your devices so that we're not interrupted. I'll start with myself here. And with that, Rainey, where are you?
I'm here.
Oh, they moved you. All right, good to see you. Do you want to take the roll?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Abikaga. Thank you. Langley. Langley is absent. Bird.
Here.
Cohen. Cohen is absent. Davis.
Here.
Thank you. Den. Den is absent. Foley. Here. Thank you. Jane.
Here.
Kamei. Kamei is absent. Lee is absent. Lee Eng.
Here.
Thank you. Mahan. Here. Montano.
Here.
Rennie is absent. Torres, absent. Turner, absent. Vice Chair Lopez. I don't see him online. He's absent. Chairperson Chavez. Here. Thank you. You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And to give our opening comments for our workshop, I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair and Board Directors. I'm really absolutely happy to have you here today. You'll see why, as we go into these two items today, how important they are. We have a couple of people at the two here who are actually helping assist our staff members to actually cover the two items, the future of light rail and some of the discussion, some of the research that we're doing, as well as the financial plan that we submitted for the New Starts Engineering BART Silicon Valley Phase 2 plan, the financial plan. And this is just the plan for that. The final plan will be submitted with the full funding grant agreement. So both of these have some detail that are going into it. That's why we're bringing it to the board workshop, so that we're able to provide a little more detail, get some more in-depth questions, so that we're able to have a more fuller discussion. So I really appreciate you attending today and having that focus and detailed discussion. So I'm going to turn it over now to the chair to introduce the first topic on the future of light rail. Thank you.
Well, I think you just did. So Derek, come on up. And Derek, if you'll bring your team. And if folks, if you could all introduce yourself, just so the board gets to know all of you.
So we may have set a record with the number of people that All right, good morning, board members and staff. My name is Derek Calhoun.
Yeah, Derek, can you bring the mic?
closer to you.
Yeah,
You have to just move it.
Got it.
and just turn it on. Yeah.
There we go. We could probably turn them on. Good morning, board members and staff. My name is Derek Calhoun, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at VTA. We're here to discuss the future of light rail. Today's presentation will feature a couple of key contributors, Austin Jenkins and Chris Eichen, who will give you the history of light rail and its relevance today. Jesse Soto will give us an update on the off-catenary light rail project. Juan Carlos Hernandez from Mott McDonald will discuss the feasibility study completed for the light rail project. And then Jason Kim will conclude and will give us a look at the new technology and how we've examined integrating these items into the future of our rail system. After today's presentation, we would like the board to be more informed about the upcoming research projects with light rail. We would also like to hear from you if, one, we're on track, what else we can be looking into, and then any other information that the board would need moving forward. As we approach replacing the fleet in 10 to 15 years, VTA has taken a unique approach to look at how the future of light rail will evolve. At the current pace, the fleet would reach the end of its useful life by 2032. Operating more single-car trains could extend the life up to 7 years, reaching the end of useful life by 2039. This could save up to $10 million per year in operating costs from operating only single-car trains. A new fleet of modern light rail vehicles will be procured between 2034 and 2039, with VTA's rail ridership in 2023 showing that we are now the 5th best in growth out of 31 peer agencies, and also the approval of the East Ridge extension. Light rail becomes a huge and viable system for the future. There are several questions that we must realize, though, before we get a full fleet. Do we keep operating light rail completely on catenary? Or do we convert to a new technology, such as off-rail battery electric catenary? Do we try to put off a decision for a few more years? What is the timeline of the fleet decision? How do we reduce our ongoing costs? Parts issues with procurement, our timeline implications for moving towards a new technology are incredibly critical. Does the Super Bowl and FIFA also play a role with the research project and allowing customers to give us that feedback? These are all valid questions that we vetted. And during the discussion, you'll see the approach that we took to investigate this process. I'd like to turn the presentation over to Chris Eichen and Austin Jenkins to talk about the history of light rail and how important it is to our community and the South Bay.
Good morning, Board and VTA staff. My name is Austin Jenkins. I'll be brief. I'm the Senior Operations Advisor to Derek and his staff. The first map you see shows the electrified system, rail system, basically that existed prior to World War II. By World War II, most of this was gone, and we've gone over to diesel buses and automobiles. The country experienced changes. The next slide will show that for most of the years up to the early 80s, there were only two electrified systems west of the Mississippi. That was New Orleans and San Francisco. The revival began in Calgary and in Edmonton, followed quickly by San Diego. The map on the right shows the revival that occurred. We were part of that revival. And it was a wave of revival. Now, why was light rail selected? I think that leaders saw, and we talk about Rod Diridon, talk about Norman Mineta as people. I actually trained and certified Rod Diridon to operate a train way back when, but permanence, that's one of the main things that business leaders could, in fact, make plans around. We knew that capriciousness would not lead to the ripping out of tracks. It's clean transit. There's virtually no local pollution. They're efficient. One operator can transport 600 people versus 90 in a bus. And it's compatible with buses, bicycles, taxis, other modes of transit. So it serves as a terrific spine. And it does give the potential to manage the future growth in cities. Next one. The question we had was, if we build it, will they come? This was an aspirational system. Unlike other systems that had hard, dense cores, we were building in fields, agricultural fields along North First when we tested these trains. And we've seen what has happened. We're finally starting to see the density that we longed for with some of the housing right outside here and some of the headquarters for PayPal and so on that exists. Here's the 49er game. I think this is the first game when we restarted the system after the tragedy. There's no better way to get to the game. We carry 8,000 to 12,000 people in and out of that game in any event. Light rail is the best mode. I'd like to show you a couple of pictures of our peers where I've participated, and then I'll turn it over to Chris Eichen, my colleague. You can see Denver, the West Line, we opened. You can see the Oklahoma City streetcar, which is interesting because it's relevant here. That car operates off wire for approximately 30% of the time. And then Seattle. At this point, I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague of 40 years, Chris Eichen.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Austin. My name is Chris Eichen. I'm a longtime former VTA employee and now a consultant supporting the demonstration vehicle project. While getting ready to implement rail system again in San Jose, VTA staff and County Supervisor Rod Diridon at the time studied and visited American and European transit systems, including Zurich, one of the most respected and advanced operations at the time. Working for that agency, I introduced these representatives to Zurich's latest technology, maintenance operation, as well as a signal priority for transit. Low-floor vehicle, unfortunately, had not been developed to the point where it would be suitable for application in North America. The Geneva vehicle, for instance, could only operate at below 40 miles an hour and still would not provide full level boarding. Next slide. Then, in the end, VTA opted to specify service-proven technology for their vehicles, which made a lot of sense considering the experiences and difficulties San Francisco and Boston experienced with their recently deployed Boeing standard LRVs. And the result was a European-style rail system with conventional overhead electrification. Unfortunately, the cars ended up with a 20-year-old system for the propulsion package that was rather inefficient and also maintenance intensive. Station platforms were at the sidewalk level, and wheelchair access was provided through the installation of waist-size lift that we can see here. This option was the least intrusive in terms of land use and suitable for urban environment, but it did result in great delays of 4 minutes or even more for each loading and unloading cycle for a wheelchair. Next slide, please. VTA was considering the Tasman extensions when ADA was enacted, and by that time, low-floor technology had matured, and a decision was made to transition the entire rail system to low-floor level boarding. This will result in the greatest operational efficiencies. It also led VTA to sell their fleet of the initial 50 cars to Sacramento and Salt Lake City, since those vehicles still had quite a few years of service life remaining. The new low-floor vehicles also introduced other advanced technologies, primarily implementation of AC propulsion power, which resulted in substantially reduced energy consumption and fewer requirements for ongoing maintenance. In 20 years since we introduced low-floor at VTA, technology hasn't stood still, and as one might expect, European and overseas agencies are again at the forefront of implementing such alternative technologies. But I'll let Jesse Soto get into more details on that.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, board members and staff. My name is Jesse Soto, Deputy Director of Maintenance for VTA. I will be presenting on the current light rail vehicle research project. The project will consist of purchasing up to 2 demonstration vehicles and/or possibly retrofitting an existing train to test the latest technologies applicable to VTA's light rail system. I will give an overview of the technology staff is focusing on to eventually modernize the fleet. Excuse me, starting with the trains that utilize off-wire technology, consisting of onboard energy systems, utilizing longer vehicles with 150% of our current capacity and the added operational benefits. More information as to the improved passenger amenities and the feasibility study supporting this will be presented later in the presentation. VTA conducted a request for information on RFI from car builders to discuss the project. The RFI included one-on-one interviews with the leading car builders. The builders provided VTA with information about their capabilities to produce off-wire capable vehicles, increase capacity trains, and discuss their overall modern advantages. The governing body of the California Public Utilities Commission, CPUC, was included in the RFI process to anticipate any potential regulatory concerns of placing the demonstration vehicles into revenue service. Thus far, the CPUC has been very interested and supportive of the project. As part of the information provided to VTA, car builders offered different solutions for demonstration vehicles and communicated the delivery of the demonstration vehicles could range between 19 and 36 months depending on the car builder. The off-wire technology would allow VTA to potentially remove the overhead wire from areas that have been problematic to maintain without an impact on the operation, all while lowering maintenance costs as well. Additionally, off-wire technology would allow the extension of the rail system into areas such as the airport, high commuter areas, and neighborhoods where the electrical infrastructure does not currently support light rail. Staff are targeting a demonstration vehicle with an off-wire range of 10 miles and focusing on areas of the system in 4 to 5 mile increments to run off-wire vehicles and monitor their performance. Additionally, the longer vehicles would increase rider capacity and allow VTA to replace 2 current trains with a single car, further reducing maintenance and operating costs of the agency. The goal has been to possibly receive the demonstration vehicles for the larger events coming to the Santa Clara County in 2026. Most notable are Super Bowl 60 and the FIFA World Cup games, both held at Levi Stadium. Currently, VTA is on track to possibly showcase a vehicle for the 2026 Super Bowl and potentially receive a vehicle by the World Cup games. This would allow staff to test new technologies on our system and gather the operational and maintenance data of the vehicles needed for the viability of an off-wire system for the agency. VTA has engaged in an aggressive schedule for the demonstration vehicles. Staff expects to advertise in the second quarter of 2024 and possibly request board approval by the third quarter later in the year. The feasibility study will be reviewed in detail next by Juan Carlos.
Thank you, Jesse. Good morning, Board of Directors. My name is Juan Carlos Hernandez, and I work for Mott MacDonald. We have been supporting the VTA on this project. And today I will be presenting an overview of the feasibility analysis that we developed. This analysis focused on two major components. One is the implementation of onboard energy storage system, or OESS, and the exploration of autonomous personal rapid transit systems, or PRT. Well, Jason Kim will elaborate later on the potential of or PRT systems. I will focus on the implementation of OESS. Next slide, please. Yeah, the implementation of this system aligns with VTA's long-term vision. The integration of this system allows for partial off-wire operations, increasing the system's reliability, especially in sections where the overhead catenary system has traditionally faced maintenance challenges. Also, we're planning to expand the passenger capacity of the LRVs, which will prepare the agency for future expected growth. Through the adoption of the OESS, we aim to reduce energy consumption, leading the way towards a more sustainable future. And of course, these advancements in our LRVs pave the way for future extensions, offering flexibility and the opportunity for system growth without the constraints of existing infrastructure. So assuming the integration of an OESS, we studied three different energy supply options. One is partial OCS, so a section of the system doesn't have OCS. Second is fast charging, where here we assume no overhead catenary and only fast charging infrastructure at specific points in the line. And the third one is hydrogen technology. For our energy supply comparison, we consider several factors. Some of them, for example, is the maturity and risk associated with each of these technologies, operating and capital expenses, the impact of on our current infrastructure, and the maintenance of infrastructure. This comparison led to clear conclusions. Next slide, please. We concluded that the integrating partial overhead catenary system with the onboard energy storage system presents the highest overall performance. This approach offers operational benefits, but also minimizes impacts and costs associated with infrastructure modifications. In contrast, fast charging requires significant investment into new and costly infrastructure, which will demand considerable capital expenses. And hydrogen was the lowest in performance, as this option brings substantial risk, costs, and complexities. Next slide, please. An important component of the onboard energy storage system is the battery pack. So as part of this analysis, we also looked or evaluated different types of battery chemistries. For example, the LTO and NMC. Each one has its unique advantages in terms of capacity, charge rates, and life cycle. We found that LTO is the best chemistry for these applications, as they can handle power better, charge faster, and last longer through more charge cycles. And also, we also look at commercially available battery packages to understand better how we can integrate these battery packs into the existing vehicle configuration. Next slide, please. So what we found is that there isn't enough space to accommodate the new OESS that meet the desired range and performance criteria on the current vehicles. So because of this limitation, we consider a 5-module vehicle design in our analysis. So this extended design not only enables to fit a larger battery system, but also improves the vehicle's performance and of course, its passenger capacity. Next slide, please. We also did modeling and simulation. So we model the green line and the blue line. We also model a 5-module LRV, and we assume maximum passenger load to simulate worst-case scenarios. And we run simulations through the green line, for example, just to understand energy demand requirements. We also analyze different configurations of an onboard energy storage system to operate off-wire between the stations of San Jose Diridon and Gish, which covers approximately 4.5 miles. Next slide, please. So after all this study, we identify in this particular case that this battery, the 144 kilowatt hour LTO battery, is optimal for this specific application. So to put this into perspective, a 5-module LRV equipped with this battery size at full passenger capacity can operate continuously on the green line, going, without accessing the OCS between Gish and Diridon. When it's in contact with the OCS, it will charge batteries. It will also capture energy from braking and also charging at the terminus. So in conclusion, our plan of wire operation, for example, in this particular case of removing catenary from Diridon to Gish station, is not only visionary but feasible. Our studies also show that a shift to a 5-module LRV is essential. These extended modules provide the necessary capacity for energy storage and passenger space. On the technical side, our research indicates that an LTO battery is the best choice for our system. And we also discovered that with a strategic use of the current OCS for charging and potentially using terminal charging infrastructure, the need for large onboard battery capacity diminishes. And finally, additional simulations are recommended as these are crucial to understand the range and effectiveness of the chosen onboard energy storage system, to try different potential alignments and or extensions and under various operational conditions. And now I leave you with Jason Kim. Jason?
Hi, good morning. My name is Jason Kim. I'm a senior planner here at VTA. I'm going to talk a little bit about the transit technology trends we've been seeing in the industry, as well as just some of the general trends we've been seeing in the transit industry. We did want to start by saying that we continue to see bus rapid transit and light rail extensions being built across the United States. These are still very popular technologies, really being used very successfully in lots of different areas. We have been looking at some of these newer technologies, though. For example, automated fixed guideway systems or PRT systems. The pictures on the right show the Honolulu Skyline system, which was just recently opened. Generally considered the most advanced transit system in the United States. It's fully autonomous, fully grade separated, very expensive and infrastructure intensive, but operates very well. Some of the other things we've been monitoring include the Morgantown PRT, which is actually a mini people mover that's on the West Virginia campus that operates with pod cars, as well as we've been working closely with San Jose on their planned people mover project for the airport. Next slide, please. We did want to talk a little bit about speed and capacity and how some of these modes can work together. On the bottom left shows in the blue box is street transit. So this is your typical buses, which are generally low capacity, generally low speed. In the middle, in the dark orange, you have light rail. BRT systems typically fit in here as well, where higher passenger capacity, higher speed can serve markets that typical buses can't. And then the rapid transit would include things like BART and Caltrain. So very high speed, very high capacity, but not really suited for things that buses typically do. We did add a people mover box in here as well, if you see in the gray. People movers are typically lower capacity and their speed is somewhere between buses and light rail systems. The people mover can admittedly, with those speed and capacities, can serve a lot of the trips that our VTA buses and light rail system serves today. But there's a lot of trips on our light rail system that can't be served by something like a people mover. A couple examples were the stadium service that we had showed previously, where you have so many passengers that would just kind of overwhelm a PRT type system. We also have some very high speed segments on our light rail system that are fully grade separated. This includes the area along Highway 87 where a lot of commuters take it to go to downtown San Jose or San Jose State, where our average speeds are somewhere in the 45 mile per hour range, which is roughly maybe twice the speed, average speed of a PRT type system. So what we're really seeing is that we think that light rail and people movers serve generally different markets, but can really work together at VTA. I think that's kind of where we're moving towards. Light rail really does have a very specific market here at VTA, though. Next slide. And we did want to talk a little bit about the advantages of light rail we're seeing, especially with newer vehicles. Some of the things that are behind the scenes that are going to be bigger benefits with new vehicles include better maintenance monitoring. Those new vehicles are much smarter to give us a better sense of ways to avoid over-maintaining our system, just to give us a better sense of what maintenance we need to do. We're also starting to see a lot of what we call operator assist features, which include potentially monitoring what's in the right-of-way, maybe even automatically stopping the train if there's an obstruction. And then some of the passenger side amenities are just improved information, improved signage. The bottom right picture shows some of the onboard signage in Berlin, where it shows you each stop as well as the minutes to each stop. There's things like that that are on newer vehicles that we would love to see with newer vehicles here at VTA. The last thing I want to mention is some new operational efficiencies. Something we've been testing out in the city of San Jose and some other places is cloud-based transit signal priority. We've been testing this on a number of our buses already, and that's something we would love to see on our light rail trains moving forward. I'm going to pass it back off to Derek to give a summary for today's presentation.
Thanks, Jason. In conclusion, our rail system is the best option to build and to grow VTA's system in the future. With ridership growth, the advanced technologies that we can partner with our rail system, the options to grow within this system could be endless. We'll continue to evaluate new and innovative ideas, even while getting feedback from the community and our future riders. We're hoping that through research of the off-catenary vehicle, it'll allow us to get to new and dense areas that we have not served. Introducing a longer light rail vehicle with more capacity that covers the length of the platform would also be a great added feature for the customers. Along with the other new modes of transportation that could be married to the light rail system, light rail operated by VTA is the option for the future. And the future here at VTA is not to wait for the competition, but to be the competition. We aim to deliver safe and reliable transportation through the South Bay and beyond, and that concludes our presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, and, oh, yeah, go ahead. Just let me follow up on that. You know, a lot of the work that you saw today was really to prepare us. The feasibility study allows us, and the work that's being done allows us to know what we want to look for in the RFP, in the RFP, when we're asking for the demonstration project. You know, what kind of vehicle are we looking for? What kind of battery are we looking for? What do we need when we look for, can a supplier of that demonstration project give us what we need? And those are the things that we're really looking for. What are we going to judge against when we're looking at these suppliers? We don't know if everybody can do it. There were a lot of, I think we had 5 vendors really talk to us during the RFI, which is great. There's actually more rail suppliers right now than bus suppliers in this country that can, that right now, which is very sad in the bus industry.
It says something else.
Yeah, in the OEMs for buses. But I will say that, you know, we've been doing a lot of work. There is not any suppliers in this country right now that do light rail vehicles off catenary. When we saw the streetcars, that's great, but
They're starting to now.
yeah, what, they are starting to?
They are starting to now.
Right, the streetcars are much lower speeds, but there's nothing at a higher speed right now. They are over Europe, and there's people who are starting to, who's doing it right now?
St. Louis.
Oh, St. Louis is starting to? But we have not been able to, you know, we really want to see what's out there for the next fleet, otherwise we'll just stay with this, we were sort of, you know, staying with the same fleet that we have now. And just give a little history, and I know Austin remembers this, actually, you might have been on the board when we voted to.
History, age, I hear it.
I know,
Go ahead.
in 2000, after we voted 2001 or 2002, what we actually did on the measure of 2000, bought 100 new vehicles, bought them all for what we thought we would expand our light rail system for. So our vehicles, we bought all 100 vehicles. We've never needed to use all 100 vehicles ever for the system.
Right.
So we have a lot of vehicles right now. And we don't see the need for 100 vehicles going forward. So that's the other thing, that we would save on the need, you know, the maintenance of the vehicles. We have the ability to actually fine tune. We're actually seeing our maintenance costs drop right now, that we've really been focusing on where our costs are. And Derek will be showing some of those numbers, I know, soon to SSTP&O and going back there. But, you know, our focus is really how do we not be the highest operating cost in the country for light rail? And what are we going to do?
Future rail, yeah.
And we are. And, you know, what are we doing? And really having the opportunity to make this system work the best that we can. And there's real opportunities for funding for this. Because we're working with CPUC, that really gets a lot of, some of the regulations already working for us, so that other California agencies like San Diego, Sacramento can actually, and LA can actually be able to use these vehicles as well. There also is no battery manufacturer in this country that can purchase batteries that are Buy America as well. So that's the other issue on rail vehicles. So you can't do that, there's nobody who's making the batteries for rail vehicles at this time. So that's another issue. We went out to DC to talk to FTA's Research and Innovation Office, and as well as ARPA-I and ARPA-E. And so they're aware of that, and they're trying to work with some of the universities that have research in those areas. But so there's been a lot of work we've been doing and working with some of the rail agencies, but we really want to be able to move this forward. So questions are welcome on this
So
topic.
here's what we're going to do. I want to acknowledge that our vice chair is online. Welcome, Sergio. And also, we have Omar and Rosemary who've also joined us. So welcome to all of you. What I want to do is see if there are any public comments first, and then colleagues, we're going to go to questions. I'm going to shape that part a little bit just so that we can get some answers for our staff. Do we have anybody from the public who'd like to speak on this item?
There's none in the room, but we have two, Madam Chair, online.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Eugene, go ahead, please, and begin speaking when you're ready.
Morning, board members. Eugene Bradley, Silicon Valley Transit users. Bravo on VTA pursuing the future of light rail. Look forward to trying out the demonstration cars at the FIFA World Cup as well as Super Bowl LX. One other thing of note of an opportunity to possibly test out any new light rail technology or help give a preview. About this time next March, we'll be hosting March Madness, the regional finals at San Jose at SAP Center. So just another additional event to let the public know about the future of VTA light rail. This, given that light rail serves the Shark Tank at the San Fernando and Duraden light rail stations. Thank you. See my time.
Thank you. The next speaker is telephone number 8150. Go ahead, please, and begin speaking when you're ready.
Good morning, board members and staff. My name is Doug Muirhead. I live in Morgan Hill. Two quick questions. One has to do with the single-car light rail train. I ride from Santa Teresa to Government Center and River Oaks. I sit in a seat and work on my computer. Single cars may mean people have to stand for their trip, and that would be a disincentive. Second question, resiliency following an earthquake. What are your plans for the rails and for the overhead catenary system, especially if that system is being used to charge your batteries? Thank you for the workshop and the opportunity to comment.
And that concludes our public comment.
Thank you. Colleagues, here's what I would like to just turn everyone's attention to on the recommendation. Really, I think this is the discussion today is really focused on what any kind of questions, direction, feedback that you'd like to give relative to the RFP that's going out. And so what I'm going to ask is as we get the board's feedback, if you at the end of the discussion could just reiterate the steps that would be going forward along with the funding that you anticipate being attached to that would be great. So I'm going to start. I'm just going to see if anybody is interested in SUDS. I'm going to start with SUDS, and I'm just going to go to see everybody's comments if they have them or questions.
Okay, well, I was really shocked by the experience with the door closer units and how much customization goes into all of our buses and our trains and everything. And so my first question is, are we partnering with any other transit agencies so that we can not have a custom? I mean, it looks like we're making a custom car here with the 5 modules. The standard is 3 modules, but now we're going to a custom design with 5 modules. And then I've never heard of lithium titanium oxide technology. All the cars use LFP or NMC, and I know NMC has fire issues, but I'm really concerned about not having second source for this sort of esoteric technology that doesn't seem to be readily available for cars. And and so maybe could be more expensive. But what I wanted to understand was that, you know, we're spending a lot of time now redoing our overhead catenary lines. That came under discussion at the last board meeting. So I know we're doing this test between Diridon and Gish. I guess you're just gonna, the catenary lines will be there, you're just gonna turn off the electronics, so you're not sucking juice out of those, right? But at some point, we want to not repair those lines. And so how many trains do we run on a line that would need, how many cars will we need if we stopped repairing our catenary lines on, do you know what I'm saying? Right now, we're getting 2, but do we need 10 to be able to actually start not doing the repairs of those catenary lines?
Suds, I'm going to
we
stop
get
you
all
because you're on question 3, and I want to make sure that each question gets answered. So I'm going to ask for, there were 3 that I honestly understood. So one is customization. You know, are we partnering with anybody else? 2 is the battery issue relative to how experimental, how redundant, how safe. And then the catenary lines, I'm gonna stop at one question on that, which was were you asking if the catenary lines would be needed in the future, or?
Well, I think eventually there are certain intersections where it's very
What's the
complicated.
question that you were asking?
So how many trains do we need?
Long-term for the current system
long-term
if we
to
don't?
run one line
Okay,
where we can take away the catenary lines
Great.
for intersections and complicated.
got it. Thank you.
So I'll go to the first question when you asked about the longer vehicle and if anybody else has a longer vehicle, and also too, if we are working with other entities. So we involve ourselves in a lot of consortiums and looking at what everybody else is doing. If we have the opportunity to be able to marry with another system, we are more than open to doing something like that. At this time, you don't have a lot of vendors right now, except for the vendors over in Europe that have off-catenary that are working with this off-catenary feature. The one thing that we want to try to do here at VTA is create innovation, do things different, and if it's working the way that it's working in Europe, not be the last ones to get it, but be the first ones to get it and to set that tone for others to follow. So that's one of the other pieces. You want to talk about the line, and then I'll have Juan Carlos talk about the lithium battery.
Yeah, so I'll go to the third question. I get the sense what you're really asking is when we could start taking down some of the overhead lines. I think that would typically happen once we get our new fleet in place, which Derek said maybe starts delivery in the late 2030s. Because really you start taking those down when you have a full fleet that can accomplish the off-wire operations. In the beginning, you're right, it would just be kind of a test to make sure we can do it. I'll pass it off.
But real quick, again, we're not looking to take down all the catenary.
Yeah.
There may be a necessary need for us to maintain and keep catenary, but in certain areas where we have trouble issues that you see all the repairs we have to constantly do, we want to have the ability to take those down and then hit other areas that we don't even have the ability to hit by train now, like the airport and other places like that. Go ahead, Juan.
Yes, in the case of LTO batteries, they are usually applicable for this type of for uses, and they are renowned for their robustness. Sorry about that. Robustness. The rapid charging capabilities, and which make them ideal for high use, intense operational profiles. They also have excellent characteristics for charge-discharge cycles, in the thousands. So the life cycle is way better than the alternative batteries, which means that during the life of the vehicle, the replacement of these batteries is not gonna be as frequent as if you use other type of chemistries.
Why do no cars use this technology?
Well, cars are a different application. Cars, it doesn't handle the same type of power that these batteries carry. They don't have to discharge as fast as often as these batteries in these trains will do. So for those reasons, yeah, cars use different chemistries. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just looking, see anybody else? Yes, Lynette, go ahead.
Thank you so much for your report. I think it's exciting, but what I'd like to understand is we're talking about the vehicles here. In the feasibility report, we need to understand what modifications we would need for the rail system itself as we talk about, supporting these new vehicles. So I think that's important to really get to understand and what we need to know, and the costs tied with that. In addition, when we replace these vehicles, what about the disposition of our current vehicles? Will we be getting funds for that, or are we going to be able to sell that off? And how are we going to, replace them or transition them out? Thank you.
So first the rails, then the cars.
Yeah. So go ahead and you can answer the rail piece and then I'll answer the cars.
Oh, I thought we were going to do the opposite.
Go ahead, man.
Dealer's choice. Yeah. Well, I think you're right. For the rails, I think that's something we're going to have to analyze. But I think the first step is understanding what these new cars can actually do, because then that'll start to dictate what we need to do with our rails moving forward. That similar with the overhead, we don't really know how much overhead we can take down until we fully understand what capabilities these new light rail cars will have. So.
I think that what she was asking also, though, was about the rail itself, that because are you looking for systems that are, that will function on the current rail, the base rail system that we have as well?
Yeah, it is. We're not changing the rail system itself. So the rails will stay the same. So we're not going to be ripping up any streets or anything. No, it'll operate on what's on there right now. So.
I wanted to also make sure that we introduced our project manager, who's on here, is Michael Bates. You asked about the cars and, what are we going to do with the cars? So there's several different options that are coming in the RFP. Either we look at potential rebuild. We look at, there's several different things that we look at that could potentially work for the pilot fleet program. For the full fleet, we will have to assess and analyze that, and hopefully by the time that we get to the replacement fleet time, the federal fund requirement that we have left will almost be exhausted. So we'll look to try to see if we can, either retrofit that fleet or either see if we can get it to someplace else, like we'll potentially do with our buses as well. Mike, you want to add to that?
Yeah, so going back kind of to the infrastructure part, so we're ideally trying to bring the new vehicles to match our infrastructure, so we have the least amount affected by the whole overall infrastructure. At the same time, with this demonstration project, we're looking at what is also the upgrading some of the infrastructure as we bring in a new fleet, because there's definitely older signaling technology and stuff. We want to upgrade that at the same time. So we'll anticipate some of those costs and take advantage of, new technology with the new vehicles and try to implement a system to help upgrade that as well. And there will be some, in the shop areas, I think is where we'll see some of the differences in maintaining a different vehicle as it comes in. But I think for the most part, most equipment for maintaining vehicles is very similar overall and easily adjustable to a new vehicle or new train that's coming in. And there's a standard platform heights that we'll all be maintaining as we do that. So that's a similar platform height throughout the country. So it won't be something where we're drastically going outside and have to do a lot of major changes to our infrastructure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to keep going. Carmen, did you want to weigh in?
Great presentation, thank you. So I know that the main issue here is to replace the light rail, not the cab. But I still see the problem with it's not going to go faster. Yeah. And the infrastructure, the rail system, I've always felt that it should have been elevated at the time when it was built, because you're going to have the same problem, even though you might change the cabs, but people are not going to ride, because the whole point is to get people on these trains. But if they're going to be going so slow, no one's gonna take them. So I'm just really concerned that you need to include the rail system and to elevate certain sections. I know it's costly, but at the end, it is worth it, because you have people that, especially if you connect BART, because a lot of people will be using BART in the future. People want to get to their jobs, but right now, the way the system is, they're, like in Milpitas, we have a BART there. But when they get on the light rail, it's so slow, so people take their cars. So that hasn't been addressed. And also, if you can go to slide 28, because I need to understand what you mean by green and blue line were modeled. So is that where you're thinking about making the changes or adding those new cabs?
Yeah, when I refer as a model, it means that we took all the characteristics of the alignment, curvature, elevations, and we created a digital model of it. And also, we created a digital model of the 5-module LRV that we expect, loaded at maximal capacity. And then we simulate operations. The main objective of that is to understand the energy demand of the vehicle. To know, for example, how much energy you need to move without accessing the catenary to move from Gish to Diridon. So with that information, you use to size the capacity of the onboard energy storage system. So that's what we did.
And if I can maybe add to what Juan Carlos said, I think with the model that we created, this was just an example of where we may take the catenary down in the future. I think the actual locations of that, again, we're still figuring that out.
Okay. And then on slide 27, that's where the battery, I guess that's where the batteries will be located. So I'm just concerned that they're not close to the passengers, so in case it blows up, so safety. So is that where you decided that the batteries will be located? Is that what that?
Yeah, and in these two diagrams, so of course we show the 3-module vehicle and then we show the 5-module vehicle, and it's just a graphic description of the available space for this system. So as I said, using that example of removing the catenary from Gish to Diridon, we came up with a size for the system, and we look at commercially available battery packages, so we know the dimensions, and then based on that, we realize, well, they don't fit in the 3-module vehicle. And that's why at that point we considered the 5-module width, which has additional modules, of course, and more space on the roof for this system. So the battery and the system will be installed on the roof of the vehicle, and these systems comes with safety measures, safety appointments to keep the battery, for example, at the perfect temperature, and they are installed in protected cases. So yeah, all those safety related concerns are addressed when installing these.
And then one more, the PRT, personal rapid transit. From what I have been seeing, they're not really rapid. They're like a carousel. So I think you need to rethink that. So really study that if it's worth it, because it's the cost. Oh, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. Colleagues, I just wanted to make an observation. We have about 20 more minutes for this discussion, and so I'm going to ask if folks can be discreet, and I'll keep going just because I want to make sure. Frankly, this is really important, and then the other thing we have to talk about is BART money. So both are important. All right, so I'm going to ask folks to make their questions discreet and the responses quicker. Thank you. Rosemary.
Thank you, and I apologize for coming in late, so you may have covered this. But I was curious, is there an opportunity to do sort of a joint venture of some sort. And I know that, we're going into this sort of light rail research project and all of that. And to me, it's very interesting, but it makes me think about, are we learning from those in the industry, or are they learning from us? I mean, are we the guinea pig, or which way is it? Because to Sud's question about being so custom, over the long run, it does become very expensive on an operational side. So I'm just wondering, the city of San Jose is working with, how do we get to the airport and doing a joint venture, trying to figure that out. So I'm just wondering, are we learning from them, or are they learning from us?
What's the implication of the question, Rosemary? Just
Well,
as a
I mean, I think it's monetary. I think it's
Oh, so
monetary.
you're asking whether or not there's an opportunity for collaboration that would be joint?
Oh,
I mean,
of
in
some
terms of
sort,
benefit?
of some sort, because if we're spending the money and they're learning on our dime,
Oh, I
that's
see.
one thing. Let's be clear about that, right? Because if we want to be the first, if we want to be out there, then, are we taking all the risk? So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. I think it's exciting. I think it's innovative. I'm ready to jump. I'm an early adopter. But at the same time, who are we bringing with us?
So again, I want to make sure that we're clear. So in Europe, this technology is in play. So right now, we are learning from what Europe has done. Just like with other technologies, we kind of get things from Europe at the last minute and learn from that way. We would be, one of the first in the United States to have something similar to this. Now, when we're looking through the pilot program and we're going through all the testing and everything else, if we could create partnerships with someone else, and we talked about it in the latter part of our presentation about trying to marry the system with other systems. That could be a potential thing that we could look at in the future to make sure that we have things tied into VTA's total system.
And then just if I could add one point to what Rosemary asked, is that I do think at some point there's value in having a presentation about the people mover, because I think the point you're raising is the actual financial partnership, which I think is an important question. And there's a model right now that it's worth maybe us understanding enough to apply it. Thank you.
I think we're going to go after and I'm not only going to say this because we're going after state money, TIRCP money, and they are very interested in this applying to, if we get this rail money, that this will apply, and the lessons learned in the demonstration project will help all California light rail properties. And so I think that is what they want to know. So if they're giving us grant money, that will apply. And I think particularly because it will deal with the CPUC hurdles, which are
Right,
huge.
Which
Yeah.
are significant.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you. Pam?
Just quickly, thank you for the presentation. There's a lot of information here and a lot for us to absorb. So when do you plan to come back with the RFP, or what's your next timeline?
So the step now is to finalize the RFP, which we're really, really close with putting it out. We're hoping to put that out probably within next month or so. And then we're going to give people the opportunity to get their bids together for an additional 2 months. We'll come back to the board somewhere around September for, whoever is the selected vendor.
Okay, and then as we do that, as we go out for the RFP, one area that is of consideration or concern to me is to make sure that they're easily accessible for all of the members of our community.
Agreed.
So disability, ADA compliance, but beyond ADA compliance.
Yes.
Thanks.
Matt?
Thanks, and I'll be quick. On the simulation conclusions, really glad we did this study. I thought it was very interesting. Did we look at all at the difference in operating costs once we potentially transition to this kind of system? What kind of savings are there over time, or what's the payback period of making the transition in the infrastructure?
As part of the feasibility study, we conducted a life cycle cost estimate. So we took in consideration capital expenses, operational expenses for the vehicle, including maintenance during the life of the vehicle. Now, there needs to be probably a little bit more analysis to come up with a better estimate as to how much cost will be saved, for example, by not having to maintain a section of the catenary.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's what
so-
I'm wondering is just the financial analysis of the transition. That may not be the only consideration, but it's an important one. Would
Right,
love
right,
to
right.
see that. And then the second, just in the interest of time, I'll move on. I'd really like to see a deeper dive in a future analysis of how we would get to GOA 4, the fully autonomous level, and what that, because we are, as you said, we're talking about cars that would be delivered in the late 2030s. That means we're learning about options that will be the operational model for the 2040s, 50s, and 60s, likely, let's be honest. So I'd like to understand what requirements we would have in the system to enable fully autonomous. And look, we probably want VTA staff on the cars regardless, to greet people, to monitor safety. I want to be clear, we're going to need people. But it is very clear to me that this is where the world's going. I took a ride through downtown Los Angeles 2 days ago in a Waymo car, and it was, let me tell you, it's much better at sensing what's going on in a very busy, crazy, chaotic environment than a human driver. So it is clear to me this is where the technology is going. Let's be very clear about what system requirements we would have. I am not convinced that in the 2040s, 50s, and 60s, you're going to need fully grade separated. I'd want to question our assumptions around what's required and really think about what that looks like. Again, we're going to need people, but what does the state-of-the-art system for 20, 30 years from now really look like? And look, you talk Europe, Asia, everybody else is going this way. Let's be at the forefront. So that's my comment and request for future conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt, Omar?
Thank you. And similar to Councilmember Kamei, apologies if this was already covered because I did come in a little bit late. One question I have was when we're talking about other cities that have done similar rollouts, especially within Europe, were there any hiccups along the way that they ran into, or what were some of the speed bumps that they hit that you might foresee, okay, now we're looking out for the same thing?
Juan, you want to answer that?
So are you referring to early adopters in Europe, for example? Yes, yes. Well, yes, I think that, battery technology has been, it's still a technology where we are learning a lot, that is progressing, that is advancing. So I think that was one of the early hurdles of the system is coming up with the correct battery, with the correct chemistry to handle these high power, these constant charging and discharging cycles. So I would say that's one of the main. But we are at a point where battery technology has advanced enormously, and which also help with bringing the cost down of the batteries, which is something positive. And I think this is a good moment to implement a system like that because we, as I said, we have learned a lot about that. So
I think one of the things for our valley is that we're flat and we don't have hills, because I think that was one of the issues is the hills. The other issue is speed, is air conditioning. Systems draw a lot, but I think for a lot of it, for us was speed. Some of the systems, we run roughly 55 miles per hour is our top speeds. And the last time I was out there 2 years ago talking to Stadler, who actually runs a battery, their top speeds were like 45 mostly. And so the batteries to hit 55 consistently for long periods. Now they're running, I think they have a 45 mile system that's running off battery right now, but it's not running 55 miles an hour. So I think that's the thing right now that they're looking at is the batteries that are running higher speeds, but they're looking now at higher speeds, shorter distances, so it's working. So those are the things that'll just keep working on. And I think it is just technology over time.
And we're confident by the time we get to our rollout, the technology will be there to do it.
I think it's now we can hit 55. They know that we're hitting 50, we need 55.
Okay, that was my only.
It's really on
Thank you.
both sides, even on the bus side, the technology continues to evolve and change, so you have to be nimble to make sure that you adjust relatively quick to the changing of.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Deb, and then Pat, you're going to have questions, and then Sergio, and then everybody already done? All right. 10 minutes, go ahead.
Thanks. I will try to be brief so my colleagues can have time. A question I haven't asked before, I realize, about our light rail cars is, do we have regenerative braking now, and will the new cars have it?
You want to answer, Jesse? Yeah, we do.
I see nodding.
Go
so-
ahead, Mike. We do.
Yes, we do, so.
Okay, great. Perfect. I just hadn't heard about that. And then will the heavier cars, I assume because of the batteries, the heavier cars, will there be an impact to the maintenance of the track and the maintenance schedules of the track?
That's a good point. We have to do the testing to see. I haven't heard that with any other agencies that have done that so far in Europe.
Okay.
So we're also looking at different technology with the track as well too, to see if it could potentially be electrified. That's something that we look for potentially in the future too.
Okay, thank you. And then the questions came up about the battery technology, that there were comments about battery technology is still improving. Will the cars be modular enough to be able to swap out battery technology as it improves over time? Since we have the cars for 30 years?
That's a great question. Want to answer that? Juan, go ahead.
Yes, that's correct. That's exactly how it is. They are built in modules, and they are easily replaceable if needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks. My colleagues and I have a lot of questions, and we don't have enough time today to really dive into all of them. And we've had this discussion in the importance of the board governance oversight. So really a question I have is how can we have an opportunity for all of our questions to be answered? Should we do this somewhat, some of them offline, and have briefing sessions for groups, or need to reschedule this because this is a really big decision? And,
Listen,
yeah.
if we need to go past time, let's go past time. So I'm really not trying, I was really trying to make sure that everybody got a chance to ask their questions. If we need to go around because something didn't get asked, let's do it now. The other thing is, from a full board perspective, this will go through, what committee is this?
SSTP.
So SS and SSTP&O, just like all the other projects we have a committee that dives deep. So I only meant to, I didn't mean to like rush everyone to their questions.
But I just think inherently there are more than we
Well, I
can,
think-
even if we extend it, there's more than we can.
Yeah, well, so first it'll go through committee, but
Yep.
the other that I'm just gonna recommend is that prior to, as this comes to the board for the RFP results, that this be a conversation that the full board has, and in part because it's a long-term decision about whether or not we want to invest. And that's, the board has to have that very honest conversation. You all raise great questions that have to be lined up with whether or not we want to make that investment. So go ahead.
Yeah, so at a high level, it seems that one of the dilemmas we have is that we're going to be making decisions for this pilot program based upon existing technologies and batteries and autonomy. But that's not where we're going to be in 10 years in technology, or even 5 years. And, we're constrained domestically on, for instance, in the battery technologies by a limited supplier base domestically and our necessity to buy American. But we have such an explosion in battery technology that's occurring. A subset of that is applicable to what we're doing here. But that subset is large. And I do not assume that the best available battery technology today is even going to be what we'll have in 3 to 5 years. Same thing on the autonomy. So really a question is, how do we pilot something now that is meaningful enough, but not lock ourselves in to what will soon be outdated technologies in both batteries and autonomy? And that's a dilemma. I don't know the answer to it, but
Do one of you?
yeah.
Well, the RFP will.
Good.
Well, I find that actually a very good question.
It
Because
is.
we have the same issues even on a systems, when you're trying to write an RFP for systems,
Things change.
like for BART, and you're writing a systems
I
contract. it's not
understand.
gonna be
That's a
implemented.
question.
So I think the
I
thing
don't
is,
expect an easy answer.
at least the RFP won't be written, and we could actually look at what the technology is in 3 years or 4 years out when you write the RFP after, from now. But the question is that to have that review,
Well,
period, in the future.
Maybe the way to get that answered again is to give you some time to think about it, because the question is a very real one in terms of.
Yep.
It's a really good point.
Yeah, and in terms of investment and so, okay,
And
what
then,
was your other stumper? Let's-
Yeah,
Go on.
another one is really understanding our system capacity needs, what we assumed back in 2000 when we bought all those cars, where we are today, and what assumptions we're making that are driving us to a 5-car system on this future, when we're talking about preserving the life of our current system by being able to curtail the number of cars.
But I think we're looking at reducing our fleet. We want to reduce our fleet size by having a larger vehicle.
Is your
And then give it-
mic on, just so they can hear
It
you?
is, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay.
We want to have, to reduce the fleet, having a longer vehicle would help us to reduce the fleet and get down to our capacity. And again, like I said in the beginning, in the opening of our presentation, we're not going down with ridership, we're actually going up. And I think once, we have, when we look at our total system, whether it's microtransit integration or other things that can come into our system to increase our ridership, I think, you'll see the worth at that point.
All right, so I'll look forward to kind of at SSTPO being able to dive deeper on a bunch of these things. So I'll not hold us back at this time on, but I'd be interested in understanding comparisons on, acceleration, what we're thinking in terms would be the future distance that we'd be able to travel on battery electric, a lot of those related questions.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Sergio?
What are the implications and trade-offs of needing to run 5-module LRV? Are there trade-offs in terms of flexibility, costs, and anything else I'm not thinking of?
The 5-unit car, this is Austin Jenkins. Best way to understand it, I think, is if you take our 3-module car and you cut it, and you added 2 more modules in between, that's the 5-module car. What you have is a 90-foot car now. You'll have a 130-foot car, 125. And Dallas was the best example I can think of when I was responsible for that system. They had a beautiful car that they cut in half to deal with ADA. And what they did, they had a high-loading car like we have, original fleet. They cut it in half, and they built a low-section floor in the middle and then plugged it back together. Hudson Bergen's doing this with the Kinky Shayo right now. With the car, a similar car to what we own is a 5-section car now in New Jersey. So that's the idea. So what you end up with is, rather than a 3-car train on a platform, you could end up with a shorter but long 2-car car on that same platform. Your capacity for ridership would be roughly the same because you have new amenities and so on. Does that make sense? I think that's the concept of 5 versus 3.
The concept makes sense, but that wasn't what I was asking.
Oh,
I'm
I
asking
apologize.
No problem. So understanding that, and understanding that because of the battery capability needs, we would need to do 5 cars. I'm trying to understand, does that mean that in places where we really only need 2 or 3 modules, we're now having to run 5 and more of them will be empty? Does it mean that we have to buy more cars overall because we have to have longer cars? That's what I'm trying to understand. And there may not be those kind of trade-offs, but I'm just seeing, because I see us as based off what you presented about the technology that will pretty much have to go to 5 cars. And so I'm just understanding what impact is that going to put a strain in any way on the rest of the system.
I can, Yeah, maybe just to jump in, I think what it does is it changes maybe the flexibility we have of operations, right? Like in some places where we're operating 2-car trains, we can run a longer 1-car train instead. But I think also think you're right. Some places where our capacity may be a little bit lower or needs are lower, we still have to run these longer trains. But I think this is something that we have to kind of really figure out kind of as we move forward. But I think the thing that Derek pointed out is it really does let us buy a much smaller fleet today. As already mentioned, we have 100 cars today that we don't use all of them. Once we move on to these longest trains, our fleet could be, in terms of number of cars, probably less than half the size of that 100, right? So, but that's something we will figure out moving forward.
Yeah, I think you ask a good question. I think the trade-off is exactly what Jason said. When you do a study, I think you're weighing off where are you between, how many cars are you trading off where you're running a 2-car train and you could just go with a longer 1-car train versus where are you maybe having, could run a different kind of train and maybe you're running 2 cars where you don't need them, or where do we have the smallest fleet based on what we're trading off? Now, we still need to do a lot of work on this, and this isn't finalized. It's just that we think we would do better with a 5-car module train and have the right size fleet. But we will still be looking at this. We'll still look at our ridership projections. So it's a great question. We say this now, and we're looking at that based on what we want to see in a demonstration project, but we could be changing that based on updated ridership modeling that we will do up to to a true RFP. So I appreciate the question.
Thank you, and I'll end here for now, but Jason, the kind of things you're raising are exactly, the kind of questions I want us to be thinking about, and it's fair if that's still being thought out, but I think as this process goes forward, and we get the RFP, we need to understand that before we go on a purchase like this, understand what the implications will be for operations. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Chair. We were asking a question about headways. So do the size of the trains change the headways? Does it leave room for increase or shortening headways, so having more frequency?
Good question, Jason.
Yeah, I would say the length of the trains would really have no difference on the headways. It's just, however, the more frequent headways, the more trains we need, but it shouldn't actually impact our ability to increase headways.
And so we're projecting hopefully shorter headways as we look at doing the analysis.
Yeah, and I guess also just quickly add, like most agencies buy their fleets in chunks, right? So we're a rare agency that bought our entire light rail fleet at one time.
Okay.
A lot of other agencies, as they increase headways, they buy more trains to let them increase headways. So
can we do that? Or?
I think that's
we're definitely looking at that. We're not looking at buying a chunk of trains at once because of the lifespan of the fleet.
Yes, yeah.
You don't want to have 100 cars that you have to replace all at once.
Yeah.
All things we've learned.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Colleagues, you all asked a bunch of really great questions, and I'm going to wrap this up. I have a list, and I'm sure you are keeping one of all of the issues raised, because as this comes back, I want to make sure that my colleagues, that all of their questions are represented in the report that comes in writing to the board. And the reason I'm learning a lot about how important it is that the board have both slides and written materials in terms of digesting what's being asked of them. The only thing I wanted to add is I want to just focus on what Carmen said about whether or not the trains will be faster. Because if they're not going to be faster, we're not going to get people on them. And so whatever comes back to us, I want to make sure that I understand how the plan will increase the speed so that we can get people out of their cars. Otherwise, we're going to spend a lot of time electrifying something that people aren't going to get on, because our challenge now is really as you all know, people make decisions about their trips on 5-minute increments, whether or not they're going to get out of their car. So when this comes back, I want to understand how this is part of a bigger program to make these all move faster, okay? And so any other last minute, everybody's good?
Just remembering the key to the speed within the system, especially here, is the TSP, the transit signal priority. And
It is
for us
that,
to have it all connected together.
Let me just say this.
Yeah.
Yes, and
in many, many parts of the system, we did not build it grade separated. One of the most important things that we're doing on the East Valley Light Rail alignment is grade separation. Because otherwise, people aren't, and we know that certain parts of the system have more people on it, and my suspicion is the reason for that is either grade separation or the lights. And frankly, this is one of those areas, and I would just say this to all of my colleagues here, irrespective of the city you're in, that I think it's worth us considering how and what monies we make available to the cities for those changes in light prioritization, because to me, it won't make sense to keep investing in a system if all of the cities aren't collaborating with this. It really doesn't. And that's not, by the way, that's not up to us, that's up to the cities. So at some point, we're gonna have to go to the cities and say, do we invest this much money in this program, or we have to not do it because we're not gonna get people on it if it's not fast. We already know that, that's not so separate of this, that's a separate kind of approach and report that may have to come through government relations, but, and be part of this discussion, because it's really one of, what are we willing to do to make sure that we have that prioritization? And I've talked to cities who say they'd rather have their eyes poked out than do it, and I don't understand why, but we might have to do some eye poking, so. All right? Thanks all, well done. So if we could get our next team up to talk, this is item 2.2, colleagues, and this is a review and discussion of the financial plan for Phase 2. And I don't, yikes. And then just, I also want to, as the folks are kind of getting settled, I do want to just ask staff to give some consideration to making sure that before we're handing things off to the FTA, that we have presented them to the board, especially around financial plans.
Yeah, so this, I was actually going to talk about this. So this, the financial plan that we have here is, it's not the financial plan that the final financial plan that will be set for the full funding grant agreement. It's the one that this is the one that's sort of draft, they'll review. And
Give feedback to you?
sorry, they'll give feedback to with their, what we do is we give them a financial plan with our New Start submittal, and they start to review it. We wanted to get it to you because it can be considered a public document, it usually doesn't go out. Last time, I think Nate Masick was here when we did the Phase 1, he actually presented it to the board at the time. So we submitted the final plan that we submitted for the FFGA, and we presented it to the board. But this one, we wanted to come through so you understand what's in the plan.
I'm sorry, this was already presented to the board?
No, the last time, for Phase 1 we submit. This one we're presenting to the,
okay.
many times, many years ago for the Phase 1, we presented the plan that we were submitting for the FFGA. This time we're presenting the draft plan that the FMOC is now reviewing. And this is what we're presenting today. So we're presenting the plan that we submitted for the New Starts submittal for the engineering, so that you can actually see what the financial management oversight consultant will be reviewing and giving us comments on. And then we will develop a financial plan that will be the final plan that gets submitted for the full funding grant agreement. And that plan you will review before we submit that as well. So this is, you'll see it twice. So this is sort of what now the financial management consultant just got this week. We just actually found out who it was, and they are actually just received it as well this week. So we wanted to bring it to the board so that you could get a sense of what goes into one of these plans and what they will be seeing, what they will be commenting on, and what you will see. So this is not a final plan, and I'm going to turn it over to Greg.
Okay. Good morning, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and to the rest of the board members. Why am I flashing on and off? This morning, I'm joined by Nate Masick, and also Tom McGuire's up here as well to answer some questions. Nate is the Infrastructure Finance Director for HDR. Nate's been a part of the BART project for many years, assisting us with FFGA and modeling process for BSV1, and has been an integral part of and a resource for us on BSV2. Nate will provide a little bit more global update on the FTA and FFGA process and the role that the financial management oversight consultant, or the FMOC, will play in this next phase. And after that, I'll review the plan and assumptions related to the project funding, the BART O&M, the VTA transit operations, and our stress test. So with that, I will turn it over to Nate.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Greg, and it's great to be here. And as Greg said, my name is Nate Masick with HDR. And it's important to think about where we are in the process at the moment. So I think this graphic helps to show the various stages in the approvals process for a capital improvement grant from FTA. So we're right now right smack dab in the middle of that diagram between 2 and 3, where we're awaiting FTA evaluation and approval into engineering. And then there'll be further refinements before there's a revised financial plan that's developed and submitted in support of a request for a full funding grant agreement. So this is an important critical stage in the process, because at the approval of entry into engineering, there's an agreed upon contribution from the federal government that's associated with that approval into engineering, and the federal share in the project doesn't change from that point onward. So any change in cost would be would have to be borne by funding sources other than the capital improvement grant. So this is why there's been so much effort to refine the cost estimates and make sure that the request is for the fully anticipated cost of the project in order to maximize the amount of the federal grant in percentage terms then that would be contributed to the project. So we can go to the next slide where that financial plan will be evaluated according to a number of planning requirements that FTA has. So before they invest in a project and put their contributions forward, they want to make sure that the project and that the project sponsor is meeting certain requirements that they require in order to receive a federal grant. They want to show they want project sponsors to demonstrate that you have a financial plan that meets certain requirements, that you fully funded the project, that you've reasonably met that you have a reasonable plan for covering the cost of the project and your cost to operate and maintain your baseline system. They also want to look at some facets of how you're operating your existing system in terms of your existing capital condition, looking specifically at your transit asset management plan to see how well the agency's being run at the moment, because one of the things they want to make sure of is that you're not sacrificing the service that you're providing for existing passengers and existing modes for the sake of an expansion project. And they also want to make sure that you've got the financial capacity to withstand either funding shortfalls from the revenue side or cost increases on the capital side to make sure that under alternate scenarios that there is a plan to cover the cost of the project, and there's a high probability that you as a sponsor would be able to carry the costs of the project to carry it through to full completion. So as Carolyn mentioned, there has been a financial management oversight consultant who's been appointed by FTA to review this financial plan. It is a contractor who has reviewed past financial plans that VTA has submitted to FTA, so that's good news that you have a reviewer who's very familiar with the agency, very familiar with the program, and has reviewed and rated financial plans from VTA in the past. And the role that the FMOC plays is similar. You may be familiar with the Project Management Oversight Consultant, or PMOC, and they're the contractor that FTA hires to oversee development of the cost estimate and delivery of the project, to really review things from FTA's perspective to make sure the project's on the right track. This is a similar kind of contractor who's reviewing things from a financial point of view. So we can go to the next slide. And this just lays out some of the ingredients that the financial plan includes. It's a 20-year projection of the sources and uses of funds that are projected for both capital and operating, both for VTA's baseline system and for the overall BART extension. It takes into account a number of historical data, key assumptions. They'll be digging into those assumptions to make sure that certain projections are consistent with past history that VTA has demonstrated. There's a lot of supporting documentation, and as Greg will mention in his presentation, there's stress tests and sensitivity analysis as well to demonstrate how the financial plan would withstand some changes in some of the base assumptions. It's part of an overall local financial commitment rating that FTA awards. 25% of that is based on your current condition of how well current facets of VTA's management are operated, and you score very highly there. 25% on the commitment of funds. Again, you score very highly there because the non-federal share of funds for the project is committed or budgeted. And then reasonableness of assumptions and financial capacity, and that's at the judgment of the FMOC reviewer based on the financial plan that's submitted. And that reasonableness rating weighs 50% of the rating. Now, the last time this was rated, the project got an overall local financial commitment rating of medium, and that rounded up to medium high, in part because of the share of the project from the federal government was less than 50%. So a very strong rating then that would be consistent with eventual award of the federal grant, which is the whole purpose of the ratings process. I'll go to the next slide. And talked a little bit about this already in terms of the purpose of the local financial commitment rating. The one thing I would add here about the rating process is that it's a planning study. Looking out 20 years, you're going to be looking at things with a lot different level of detail than you would if you were putting together your biennial budget, because there's just so many more unknowns looking out that much further into the future. Now, the financial plan does take your first 2 years into account in a very significant way. So we know a lot about what VTA's finances look like in the near term, and the financial plan incorporates that and then builds from that to project out additional years beyond that. It's a point-in-time assessment that the FTA will use to evaluate the project and determine grant award, but it's not a substitute for the other sorts of budgeting and programming activities that you oversee as a board, and it needs to, it needs to be consistent with those and fold with those in terms of your biennial budget, your capital programs, your short-range transit plans. The 2 and 10-year plans and programs that you develop are all ways of specifying in greater detail how you plan to expend funds in ways that go into greater detail than a 20-year financial plan will. So we can go to the next slide, and would just note that what we need to do in order to get a full funding grant agreement here is to demonstrate that you have the financial capacity to deliver the full cost of the project. That's $12.746 billion cost. That includes the $12.356 technical cost, plus $390 million in finance charges. This is important that FTA considers finance charges within what it defines as the cost of the project. In some ways, that's to your advantage, because then that is a federally matchable cost, so that you're able to, to the extent that they're matching on a percentage of the cost, they're matching on a percentage of what they count as finance charges as well with the grant that they award you. So you're demonstrating your financial capacity to deliver that project. And then over that 20-year period that the financial plan forecasts, you're covering VTA's existing service and assets, maintaining them in a state of good repair. You're funding operations and maintenance of the project, and you're doing that through the BART O&M agreement that governs how the costs are shared between VTA and BART.
Okay. Thank you, Nate. And then now we'll get into a little bit more of the specifics of the project funding itself and some of the details related to the model. If we can go to the next slide. Most of the slides, just for reference, most of the slides that you're going to see here will resemble many of the slides that we reviewed back in the October board meeting, as well as the October board workshop. So starting with this project funding, what this slide is basically reflecting is the increase in cost following the PMOC risk assessment, which went from the $12.237 billion number that we originally had to the 12.746. And to cover that difference in funding, again, assuming a 49.4% participation from the FTA, we're showing $252 million to be from CIG. We also have increased the 2016 Measure B basically to its fullest extent by $204 million, and then the remainder coming from 2000 Measure A of $53 million. So if we go to the next slide, what this is basically identifying for you, and again, it's comparable to what we've seen in the past, is just some of the assumptions that we're making. On the federal grant side, again, 49.4% of the project cost is being assumed to be funded by the federal government. Part of that also is we have assumed an FFGA payment stream that covers about a 13-year period. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of these risks later on in the presentation. From a sales tax perspective, the 2000 Measure A, keeping in mind that it does have an expiration date in 2036. For project funding, we did not assume dollars beyond 2036. So anything project funding related is specific to that time period for fiscal year 2036. And then as well, the 2008 Measure B also has a sunset provision that's in fiscal year 42. From funding for both the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program and the state MTC funds, just identifying the way in which we're showing the proportional share of those costs, of those funds coming in to support the overall expenditures. And then on the state MTC side, utilizing those much earlier in the process just to take advantage of those funds as they are here. The next slide, again, just shows the projected cash inflows and outflows. The upper portion reflects the outflows, and the lower section reflects the various funding sources for inflows. One thing, as I've always said, keep this in mind. This will change as time goes on, not necessarily in total, but in timing. And so we'll simply need to be ready to react and respond accordingly. The next slide basically takes the previous slide and puts it in more graphical terms. The solid line reflects the anticipated project costs for each year, while the shaded columns for each year identify anticipated receipts for the various sources. And as we discussed back in October, this slide helps you identify gaps in available funding and the timing of any financing needed to ensure that the cash is available for the project to remain on schedule. And so it's this financing piece that we'll talk about next. So on this next slide, as we said before, we will work to utilize cash on hand as effectively as we can, inclusive of state and regional funding, before issuing any debt. However, to meet the cash flow needs through the life of the project, we do anticipate issuing the following debt instruments. First, grant anticipation notes, or GANs, approximately $3.6 billion combined issuance in 2 different years of 2029 and 2031. Those are effectively secured by the FFGA and the allocations each year from FFGA appropriations. We'll also plan on issuing bonds associated with 2000 Measure A of approximately $873 million, and then 2016 Measure B bonds for the project of about $572 million. Now, each of these issuances have a relatively short term duration and therefore relatively low finance costs. Also, helping to keep finance costs low is our assumed interest rate, or the effective yield, for each of these issuances. For Measure A and Measure B, our comparable performance is our recent transaction in July of 2023. The pricing that we did then resulted in an average effective yield of about 2.57%. And so we anticipate yields between now and the time we issue to actually reduce during that time, and we believe the estimate of 2.21 is reasonable. On the GAN side, it's a little bit more short-term in nature and more secure given the support of the federal grant. These may be issued as direct bank placements or lines of credit, and we anticipate favorable borrowing rates for these instruments as well. The next couple of slides are just identifying the timing of when the issuances will be occurring and then the corresponding debt service related to each. So on this one is the grant anticipation notes of the GANs. Again, the top section shows the issuances in 29 and then 31. And then the bottom is simply showing the sculpted payment structure to match the anticipated annual appropriation of the FFGA at $500 million each year. On the next slide, it's the same exercise for Measure A regarding the timing and the amount of issuance with the debt payment, repayment showing at the bottom. The one item on this one is that red line reflects the minimum amount of revenue needed to meet our 1.3 times debt service coverage requirement for the debt service for a given year. Basically speaking, as long as the solid blue line on the top is above the solid red, then all is good. And then the next slide is simply showing the same information for Measure B. The next slide is another slide that we saw previously back in October. And for Measure A and Measure B, we wanted to keep these just as reference to the UCLA forecast that was done back in 2020 compared to the one that was recently done in June of 2023. For this Measure A, the bottom portion reflects obligations for operations and projects for the duration of the 2000 Measure A measure. The upper section reflects direct amounts currently allocated to BSV2. That middle hatched area reflects the capacity available in Measure A. For now, it's dedicated to BSV2, but it currently represents about $788 million. For Measure B, same reference here. Lower section represents all programs within Measure B exclusive of BSV2. And as sales tax forecast went up, so too did availability of funds for those particular programs. For the UCLA 2023 column, the significant takeaway here is there is no longer a hatched section for remaining capacity for BSV2. At this point, we have allocated the full 23.76% of allowable Measure B funds to the project. The next slide is, oh, I'm sorry, they didn't advance on to Measure B. My bad. One more? Nope, now we're going backwards. One more. All to get to what I consider a useless slide, so I'm not going to talk about this one. This just basically shows all the different proceeds coming in with the debt instrument that's in 2030. So the next slide is basically showing the uses of funds. Just for note here, the funding plan showed anticipated utilization of Measure B funds based on current programming estimates. For some of the out years, it assumed expenditures for formula-based programs like local streets and roads, transit operations, bike and ped. During the out years for need-based elements of the program, no assumptions were made as to the actual use of funds for specific programs or projects, but the aggregate spending assumptions were used to show the full use of Measure B dollars. The next slide gets a little bit more detail in the 2016 Measure B. When identifying available funds for the respective programs, this slide will help clarify some of the availability. The measure defined the allocation to programs to be based on net program tax revenues. So to get to this figure, we've done the following. The base sales tax forecast from UCLA, $10.273 billion. We added to that the interest earnings over the life, as well as reducing it by the net financing costs, which we're showing as financing sources of $693 and then debt service of $769, and then further reduced by the administrative costs. This gets you to a net program tax revenue of $10.311 billion. And it's this figure that is used to identify the allocation percentages for each of the programs within Measure B. Now, the FTA process requires an allocation of program interest cost to be allocated to BSV2. So when you're looking at the actual program costs, it includes $63 million to get to the $2.512 billion. For Measure B utilization purposes, the project cost is $2.449 billion, or the 23.75%. The next slide here just simply shows the categories identified that we've shown in the past, simply just depicting the various percentages and then the changes that have occurred with the various forecasting measures. Now, probably the most important slide is risks. So one of our biggest risks at this point is the assumption that we've maintained throughout the process of a federal contribution of 49.4%, and that the payout period extending to 13 years for the FFGA. Now, we've been consistent in all discussions and submittals to the FTA with both of these assumptions, and although there has been no formal counter to this number, given the capacity within the CIG program and the demand for various projects throughout the U.S., although we will remain optimistic of receiving the maximum contribution from the FTA, there is a realistic chance that the percentage comes in lower than 49.4%. At the same time, the FTA and the Office of Management and Budget may hold firm to their 10-year FFGA horizon. So once we get word of the likely direction the FTA will take, we will recalculate certain elements of the model. Now, the most immediate source to help close any funding gap is the remaining capacity on 2000 Measure A. But at this point, we will simply wait to see any comments, recommendations from the FMOC, and then we'll work with them on refining model assumptions. Another risk is basically on the sales tax side. The most significant risk long-term is actual receipts coming in lower than anticipated. Over the 20-year horizon, the likelihood of that happening is relatively small, and we'll touch on that on the next slide. The more practical risk is the variability in actual receipts each year versus the plan as developed. This will require us to be nimble to respond to, with interim financing solutions to mitigate these fluctuations. The current plan is reasonable as it assumes compound annual growth rate of about 2%. The final risk identified is that the project costs exceed the $12.746 billion budget during the life of the project. From a project funding FTA evaluation perspective, we've provided a solution to meet their needs based on our point-in-time scenario, and we'll touch on that in just a second. From a practical perspective, once the FFGA is final and the project is set, that will be our budget. Staying within that budget will be a primary focus. The reference to phasing and scope changes in this context refers basically to secondary mitigation efforts we would identify to reduce any costs. So on the sales tax, if we go to the next slide, just wanted to give some text here that, for the sales tax growth assumptions, we offer this slide to show the current compound annual growth rate of 2% is realistic. The top section of this slide, starting in 2000, is a rolling 20-year look back on sales tax growth for our region up to 2023. And so what it's showing is for each of these 20-year horizons, expecting a 2% annual growth rate over a 20-year period is not necessarily out of the norm. And the reference here is that, the aggregate sales tax receipts being assumed is not necessarily unrealistic. The trick, of course, as we've said, will be addressing the rise and fall in certain periods throughout the 20-year horizon to meet our capital and operating needs. On the next slide, one of the requirements with our submittal is to show our ability through the model information to cover a 10% project cost increase. Using my terms, we consider this an academic exercise to show capacity sort of in a worst-case scenario. And I do want to reiterate to this body, from a practical perspective, we would find other alternatives to solve the issue that's being addressed and being shown in this particular scenario. First and foremost, we would find ways to bring costs in line. But as the sensitivity test was done, the way in which we were going to cover a 10% increase in overall cost was to utilize the full amount of the 2000 Measure A capacity, basically taking all of it away. We would also then utilize any accumulation of the VTA reserve or debt reduction fund to fund a major part of this increase. Again, that would effectively eliminate all of the debt reduction fund and the reserve. And at the same time, to cover the last $90 billion, we built into it the assumption of utilizing some of the Measure B, which effectively moves that to the 25%, which was in the measure itself, but not the board action. So both of those last two items would definitely take board action. And again, I want to reiterate, this was an exercise to show to the VTA the ability for us to fund this particular increase, but it is not necessarily and would not be the way in which we would go about solving that issue should it come out. So on the next slides, we talk about the BART operations and maintenance cost. This is kind of the second phase of the plan that's provided to the FTA. This slide reflects the operating and maintenance costs VTA is obligated to cover for the BART system. So BART O&M relates to our share of O&M costs borne by BART throughout their system for a given year. BART capital is the improvements through their system to ensure operations. And then VTA other is basically our cost to cover expenses, station expenses and support outside of the O&M agreement. As you can see from this, the costs will range from approximately $125 million to over $400 million over the life of this model. The next slide overlays the annual expenses, which is the solid black line at the top with the anticipated revenues to fund these expenditures. The major funding sources to support BART O&M is the 2008 Measure B sales tax and then fair revenues generated at for both Phase 1 and Phase 2. Values in this model relate to the ridership levels approved by FTA for this project. Just one note, the hatched areas reflect years where we are utilizing the balance of 2008 Measure B fund to cover costs in excess of revenue, where today that balance sits at about $300 million. The next slide talks a little bit about the risks associated with the BART O&M side. So as mentioned in the previous slide, the revenues are modeled usually utilizing ridership figures approved by the VTA, which was based on pre-pandemic ridership. Now, we've assumed getting to that level in fiscal year 26 and maintaining that throughout the program. So there is a risk long-term for us as far as the ridership not reaching the estimated levels for several years. In the meantime, we would utilize the current 2008 Measure B balance to support the O&M, and it may require us to renegotiate our contract with BART with certain elements of the O&M agreement to lessen our cost burden relative to fair revenue. Regarding the sales tax measures, the excess capacity in 2000 Measure A is currently flowing to the BART O&M category. This is generating a balance in that fund of about $756 million by 2043. Should those funds be needed in other areas of the project, then of course that balance would be reduced. And also keep in mind, as we said, the 2008 Measure B sales tax sunsets in March of 2042. Not necessarily a specific risk to the FTA submittal, but of course one that would be a risk for us as we address from a funding perspective long term. Moving on to transit operations, for FTA purposes, just as we've done with our 10-year projections for the budget, this exercise is pretty linear in projecting long-term costs. The assumption, as Nate mentioned earlier, is a point-in-time process where we maintain our current service level. For FTA and FFGA scoring purposes, it maintains growth in revenue expenses at our historical experience. In practice, there will be, of course, fluctuations that occur and we'll address and adopt with every biennial budget cycle when we go through. With that as the premise and utilizing 24 and 25 budget assumptions as the base, expenses are growing at about 2% per year. With that growth, we anticipate operating expenses reaching approximately $850 million towards the end of this particular cycle. On the next slide, talks about the revenues for transit operations, where we're projecting to have enough revenues to support the operating expenses each year while generating small surpluses each year, again, with this modeling exercise. Main drivers in revenue, 1976 sales tax, projected to grow to $400 million by 2043. The TDA, or the quarter-cent sales tax, currently $125 million, grows to about $184 million towards the end. STA and state operating, and then fair revenue, although some would consider it still low by some standards, it still is generating meaningful revenue to support operations. That is expected to grow to about $44 million towards the end of this model. And then 2000 Measure A, again, this is one of those areas we've talked about as a risk. It represents about $60 million in fiscal year 24. It's expected to grow to $76 million in 2035. And that green hatched area reflects the assumed continuation of this revenue through some other source, again, knowing that the 2030s or the 2000 Measure A sunsets in 2036. The next slide is part of the submittal. We reflect a level of capital investment for operating and system needs. These investments are expected to be funded via grants and transit operating dollars over the years. The current assumption in this model is the low or constrained version within our strategic capital investment plan, otherwise known as SCIP. This allows to maintain a proper level of state of good repair throughout the system. As we get close to the end here, next slide here is just simply a reminder of our current sales tax measures over the course of this application. Again, the most significant item being that the drop in Measure A in fiscal year 2037 and the assumption of some other source providing at least operating funds in 2037 and beyond. The next slide is just a reiteration really of some of the system-wide risks. Talking about the volatility in sales tax receipts we've already touched on, this Measure A sunsetting. We haven't really touched on 2016 Measure B sunsetting. It sunsets outside of the current model period, but it does sunset in June of 2046, I believe, instead of 2047. And then one last item, some mitigating factors that we really didn't include in the financial plan. We did not model for FFGA the benefits to operations related to our transit-oriented communities development. So there's a positive there that we'll always rely on, as well as the impact of express lanes that could have to revenue generation for our operations. And then the last slide is just talking about next steps. Submittal. This has been submitted to the FTA with our initial engineering submittal. then FMOC will do their work and we'll revise the plan as needed to respond to their overall requests. And then we'll submit ultimately a revised and final plan with the FFGA submittal. And then I will say, as this process does move forward, I think there'll be a couple of opportunities for us to bring things to the BSV Steering Committee just on the results and discussions that we're having with FMOC and with the FTA. And with that, I will end and open it up for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, just to give you a little bit of a state, since we submitted this on March 29th. We were in Washington DC 2 weeks ago. We did a few meetings with the Federal Transit Administration, Office of Management and Budget, OMB, with the Senate Appropriations Committee staff, the minority and majority staff, as well as the House Appropriations staffs, minority and majority staff. They were all good meetings, and did just give them a sense. Greg did a very, very, very high level discussion about our financial plan and let them know what we were thinking. Most of it was primarily around, what our ask was, which was the 49.4%. The one thing that was very positive in our favor is that we have our full local commitment, which we should be congratulated upon. That is a big deal going into New Starts Engineering and have a full local commitment. The thing also is that we are asking for 13 years, and they typically have a so-called 10-year rule, though there is nothing in writing about a 10-year rule. They like to do it in 10 years because they sort of look out 10 years. So that will be something that Greg mentioned. So I don't want to tread lightly on that, because that will be a risk that they potentially consider here, and that would be something. OMB didn't say no, just said work with FTA. They were encouraged about the idea that we could actually push that out, and that we were able to have pretty strong financials in terms of our ability to finance quite a bit, or not have to finance quite a bit over a period of time. So actually, they felt good about that, as well as FTA. And then the FTA, the biggest issue for us, and I don't know if Greg mentioned this, but we are out there with Hudson Tunnel and a couple big New York projects, as well as the LA demands and some others. So, and the Red Line extension in Chicago. So we're also a very big mega project. So they are trying to balance all these big mega projects coming in with hundreds of millions of dollars of asks a year. And so that's the big push about us asking 49.4. There are other projects also asking for roughly 50%, and they've been being pushed down. So I think we're going to hear that, and I think we're going to expect that. We're hearing that grumblings from staff, but we don't know specifically yet. So I just am know that those are our two biggest risks right now. Whatever we do, we will be developing, working with the FMOC, the new plan, and we will come back to the board with the new plan before we submit it for the FFGA, so the board is comfortable with what we're submitting, because that is what we will be planning to go forward with in terms of cash flow and potential finance mechanisms.
I'm going to first go to the public and see if there are any speakers on this item.
We do have one, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Eugene, go ahead, please, and begin speaking when you're ready.
Good morning once again, council members, staff, Eugene Bradley, Silicon Valley Transit users. Just some questions regarding this report. My first question is, for any possible extension of 2000 Measure A, what's VTA's plan should the voters for some reason decide to actually reject the extension of the measure? What's VTA's plan B for that? And also on page 3-27 of the document, say lack of ridership on the BART extension can't cover VTA's operating expenses. What is the operating tax fund being mentioned here? And if the case, would a lack of ridership and operating revenue of that BART extension would imply fare hikes and service cuts throughout the system. I just don't want to see the excellent growth VTA has done post-pandemic get derailed because of any lack of ridership that might occur. Also, with the 10% cost increase, for 2,000 Measure A being boosted by $687.1 million, should the cost of this BART extension increase, which will, and that ends my comment.
Thank you, Eugene. I'm going to now go to my colleagues, and I'm going to start this way this time. See if there are any, just to be fair. All right, no problem. And Sergio, oh, is he still with us?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. That was a fire hose of information. And I'll say, Greg, it's clear that you've really gone through this thoroughly and you understand it. I'm not sure we do. So one of the struggles I have is there's a lot to absorb. We have probably a lot of follow-up questions to really grasp it. What will be the better way for us to be able to get a deeper dive?
If I could respond to that, I do want to utilize, and I realize it's not usually all of the board members who are present, but I think if you have an opportunity to at least listen in during the BSV steering committee, my expectation is especially between now and the time we would submit for the FFGA, I would imagine there'll be 2, possibly 3 meetings that would occur that if we can have items related to this, there are specific questions that maybe some of the board members have that we can address during that steering committee, I would love to be able to do that. If we needed to do a workshop between now and the submittal, I would be more than happy to entertain that one as well. I do not want anybody on this board to be uncomfortable with what we're identifying. Especially from the confines, I want to address this. There's kind of like 2 paths that we're following. One, secure the FFGA in the method in which we need to follow with the FTA is how we present the overall plan. But in doing so, making sure that the board understands, even with that particular plan, what are those risks? And that's what we try to lay out as best we can. And so I want to have those conversations with the board as best we can during this process.
And also, I'm going to make a recommendation. Again, I want to say the point of this workshop and recognizing that we're going to keep doing as many as you'll let us schedule, because part of this is everybody's schedule. But the ad hoc committee also is going to be, deep in this. So my request would be for all of you, if you don't feel like the tools we're using now are working, let's just go ahead and recommend them, because I think everybody learns differently, and I'm fine with that. But if we can just use the time now to just dive in, and then I would say the ad hoc committee should make a recommendation on that as well.
Great, and so I'll reserve a number of my questions for the ad hoc. One is that, though, the takeaway slides on the capital plan for BART, slides 22 and 24, and as Carolyn said, and Tom and others, and Greg have kind of warned us, there's no guarantee we're going to get 49.4%, and maybe a likelihood that we won't get all of that, but we don't know exactly how much. Hopefully close to that. And the shortfalls that we're talking about would be, at this point in time, and Greg made this proviso, a lot of it would be increasing the Measure A by $687 million. Now, you forewarned us that said that's not necessarily the way that we'll end up doing it, but I did want to understand if we went down that path, what wouldn't get funded by that $687 million that otherwise would.
Right, and that'll be part of the exercise. I think that we've got to be able to show to the members that whether it wouldn't be Measure A projects that are currently on being cash flowed and moving forward. Those would still maintain. It would be any other projects specific to Measure A that had been on the original plan that simply have been shelved, I'll call it, over the last several years, that we would not be able to resurrect. It also would mean, as much as and we committed to this, that we used local funds for the EBRC project. I would love for that $115 million to become available in Measure A to be able to utilize for it. But it's those type of things that we would not have the capacity to take care of. And so we would utilize the local funds.
All right, thanks.
That's it?
Well,
Okay, all right.
for now.
Thank you. Really appreciate the presentation. It was a fire hose, but it's important for us to understand all this. My question is about the risks, specifically about the O&M risks. My ears perked up when we're using pre-pandemic ridership numbers for our projections. I understand that that's an exercise that we're doing because the FTA gave us approval to do that. That's probably not super realistic. So what's our next step? We've submitted this. What's our next step? And maybe the question isn't for you, Greg, maybe it is, to actually project our O&M, our real O&M costs, because this is not realistic.
Yeah, I'll phrase it this way. I think the O&M costs, just to deal in semantics, those probably don't change. It's going to be how we pay for those O&M costs, being the revenue associated with the ridership.
Good point.
Which is the critical piece, because that's the struggle that we've got basically, and that's what BART has right now. I think the exercise is going to be us getting together with BART and really understanding overall ridership for their entire system. Is there a path for us to get to the ridership that's been projected on this, maybe at a later date? We're assuming, again, fiscal 26, 27, reaching that point. Maybe it's later, and understanding the impact. And if it's not getting to that number, then it will require us to have a conversation with BART and find some way to renegotiate the overall O&M agreement, because then we're absorbing more cost than we probably should as it relates to those revenues. I do want to caution it and say I think our anticipation is we're going to get to the ridership number. Now, whether it's in 26, 29, whatever time period, let's keep that as a basis for what we want to do. And in the short term, we've got the capacity within the Measure B fund of right now about $300 million that it can cover. It's not planned in this right now, but in the short term, it can cover that reduction in fair revenue that maybe we've assumed in here. It can help cover that cost for maybe 5, 7, 8 fiscal years to get us to that next point. So those are things we'll have to work on and figure out how we can mitigate. But it's not an easy answer.
Thank you. And to Eugene's point, I'd like to understand what the trade-offs are there for those Measure B dollars. And also, again, something we can dive deeper into probably in the committee meeting, what the plan is for reassessing that and making sure those numbers are updated. And I understand it's a long time until we get, we get phase 2 online and we need to know that. But how are we going to check in, and what's the go no go point for trying to renegotiate with BART? So those are the kinds of things that I'd like to make sure we understand. Tom's nodding his head. Thank you. You're both nodding your heads. I like that. So that we understand kind of if paths diverge, what that point is.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
Great. Anybody else? Matt?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, before you, I just want to, for the record, I want to clarify. You had made the comment about capacity within the measure and the projects that are going to be, but you would reference Measure B. I want to make sure it's Measure A that I think was the reference, because Measure B is a defined amount of dollars. It's the Measure A, $600+ million of other projects that weren't going to be used. I just want to make sure for the public record that that's more about Measure A than it was Measure B.
Okay. I thought you had said Measure B, so I picked up
Oh,
on.
I'm sorry.
But-
No. Oh, it was 2008 Measure B. I'm sorry. I got you now. I know what you're talking about. My bad.
Yeah, not 2016.
He's back.
But Greg,
Gotcha.
your budgets, our regular budgets, or like the 10-year plan that we have, we estimate the BART ridership based on
Not on the.
yeah, so when we do our budgets, we are, like for us, or our 10-year, we're estimating based on what the BART ridership is now.
Yeah.
But the planning work that we do for this
Right.
work has to be based on the ridership models and then turned into there, but we don't base our forecasted, we don't do our budgets based on
Yeah.
that. So just,
Thank
Yep.
you for clarifying that.
Yep.
Oh, did you want to jump in?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for the detailed presentation. The thing I wanted to highlight is that I think we need to really, anticipate where we'll be in November, December, when we get the answer from the FTA on where we are, and make sure that I want us to think ahead to reduce any lag at that point that might not be necessary. Can we do deeper scenario planning now around both, you've already done a lot of analysis of where we could pull additional funds from, depending on where they come in, if it's not 49%, if it's 45, 40, somewhere in the spectrum there may also be cost reductions that we would want to look at. What I don't want to end up, I guess my point is this, I don't want us to end up in November, December, getting a figure back, just throw out a hypothetical number, it's 43.5, and then we say, oh, now we got to go do more analysis. I mean, I think we just have to remember that every day we wait, the cost goes up and the residents get less value. So my question is, what is all the scenario planning we can do now and that we can be informed of so that we can hit the ground running no matter what the number is? And whatever the answer is, about 10 years or longer.
Yeah, I will say, being done now, part of the exercise, and this is where I don't want to seem as though I'm not responding to a question if it was asked, what is the answer or what is the number? I'd like the FMOC to go through their process and at least review the submittal that we've got and give us some feedback to make sure that some of the assumptions we're making don't need to be modified from the planning perspective. But I think when you talk about, can we run scenarios of different percent allocations from the feds, changing the 13 to 10, identifying what those gaps are, identifying finance costs, identifying the needs for funding, all of that is being done as we speak. With that will then be some stuff that Tom will do as far as what he'll refer to, I think, as the secondary mitigation type items. Any of those types of items are being discussed as we're sitting here today, so that we're ready for that next iteration of whatever comes to us.
Great. 'Cause
I think
my
so.
hope is in an ideal world, within a week of us getting the answer, or a day, we are sitting here and you're saying, okay, well, here was the answer, here are the constraints, now here's how we move forward, and here's our recommendation, and it's comprehensive, and we feel informed, and we can say go, and then we keep going forward. Now, obviously, there could be a scenario where we literally can't move forward, but I would like to understand. Yeah, sorry.
At your time.
That's very unlikely. I just want to reduce any unnecessary lag at that moment.
yeah, I think we're shooting more for, actually, honestly, about June, July, to be able to resolve a lot of this. This is not just, we're going to get a lot of information from the FMOC, and then a lot of this is also discussions with overall FTA, because they're just trying to work through this. Nate, can you talk, because once we do this and respond to FMOC and get a plan, when we talk about getting a financial plan that's ready for getting into new starts, this is primarily going to be the plan. That's going to be the FFGA plan, and that's why we'll be back here at the board. That makes me a little nervous, because if we're going to bring it to the board, and it's in July, and we're sort of dark, we'll have to figure that all out.
We will.
And we'll work it out.
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
Nate,
Thanks,
did
Chair.
you want to chime in?
Well, just to say that I think the plan is to, that this working version of the financial plan is most of what's in here is substantially what would get submitted as part of the full funding grant agreement, but it is subject to these unknowns that we've talked about, like the share of the federal participation, and if there's any other assumptions that need to be modified based on FMOC's review. So based on that technical analysis the FMOC is reviewing, and based on the political considerations and policy considerations that FTA is making in terms of the grant amount, those two will influence the final nature of the financial plan.
Thank you. I'm gonna see if there.
Just make a quick comment.
Oh, of course, I hadn't finished going around, so I was
I'm
gonna go
sorry.
keep going. No, Pam, you're next. Yeah, you're perfect.
Thank you for the presentation, and it is a lot to absorb. But as you're going through scenarios of if we don't get the 49.6, will you include a modification of scope at all? Because that drives the cost. And will you come back and say, if we do this, we can come into budget based on what we're given?
I'll defer that to Tom for a second.
Yes, I'm going to answer that question carefully, and Carolyn, if you want to add anything. So we've applied for an FFGA for all 4 stations, the rail yard, and the full
Right.
tunnel. So that's what's in that cost estimate. And I think all of our conversations with the FTA and the conversations we had in DC were about getting the full thing funded. A conversation about significantly changing the scope would be something we'd really have to, I don't want to say go back to the drawing board, but it would put us on a longer time frame. There are ways in which we every day we are looking to find ways to save money on this project, and we've also put a huge amount of contingency, probably allocated and unallocated contingency adds up to like 25% of that $12.7 billion. So we've done a lot to protect ourselves against going above that number. The question about getting below that number, again, I don't want to say it out loud per the chairs. I don't want to shush my mouth too. We don't want to not get the number, but if we can't count to 12.7, that's probably a harder conversation we have after July.
May I just say that I think, Pam, I understand the point you're raising, and I think this actually aligns with what Matt was just saying too, that my expectation is that we would have a robust discussion about 3 things. One, the how we get to where we need to get to. 2, what's on the table and what's not. Because
Yeah.
I think that has to be decided
Absolutely.
by the board first, because then we're talking about, whatever the implications of that are. And then finally, and I think something that is less within our sphere of control and perhaps understanding is what should our expectations be, both of the state and other partners, because of the implications and impact of the project. So I want to reiterate what you're both saying, which is I think we need both the path and then a framework for making those decisions.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well said, thank you.
Thank you. Carmen, did you have anything? I couldn't tell if your hand was up, sorry.
To be clear, it seems to me that everything depends if we will get the funding if we have a stream of revenue coming in, and really that's bottom line is our sales tax, right? And I know we have a good standing or a good rating, but I just wanted to make sure that we keep those sales tax, and then in the future, we'll be able to go back and ask the residents to keep that revenue stream of taxes, because that's really depends on if this agency is going to survive. So.
Yeah, thank you, Carmen. Suds, you get the last word here.
Yeah, so I like that we're adding the 10% and trying to figure out how we can justify 10% over the 12.7 billion. But, we're already, our unallocated, I'm looking at the March 26th PMOC report. Our unallocated contingency is 875 million. Our allocated contingency is 854 million. But we were already eating into that contingency with the launch box. So that raises some concern to me. Also, did you account for a 2039 revenue service date? What is the plan where we don't get revenue for 2 years? And then finally, I'm looking at the PMOC report, and I see at the March 14th, 2024 monthly meeting, VTA noted the following progress. Design status and advancing FFG submission. CP1, 46%, CP3, 41%, CP4, 45%. So that raises a lot of uncertainty when we're only in the 40s. I thought we were at the 60s. So can you explain to me how we're managing that risk since we're only at 40% design? Thank you.
Okay, I think most of those questions are for me.
Yeah, I was just going to reference one, though. Revenue service date, I'm pretty sure in what we submitted was assuming a 2037 date. The FTA number of 2039, again, I'll let Tom explain that one continually as far as what that 125% number is. But from a modeling perspective, we've assumed that 2037 revenue start date.
I understand.
Okay, and then the two questions about design progress and unallocated contingency. Not quite sure where that number's coming from, but I'm looking at the most recent budget that we share with you each month. Category 90, which is the total unallocated contingency for the program, is $1.7 billion, and there's another nearly $1 billion spread in allocated contingencies among the other categories. So we're on the order of $2.7 billion of total contingency within the 12.7. And that's where my comment about being nearly 25% is from. As far as design progress, we track this with the PMOC and the FTA on a more frequently monthly basis. We'll be getting independent cost estimates for the three design packages you shared from our general engineering contractor. We'll be well past 60% design when we apply. Then the PMOC and the FTA are comfortable with that level of design maturity at the application point. So, yeah.
Colleagues, I know we took questions from, or comments from the public, and I think the staff got direction. I do want to just say one thing. I thought the report was really thorough and helpful, and I would just say, colleagues, I know these are hard to get through, so over the next few nights when everybody's feeling a little sleepy, that's really worth reading, because I think it will help refine maybe the directions that we're going to go in, so thank you for that.
I'm sorry, I just want to offer also to the board, I mean, we didn't talk about it as far as how to educate or how to communicate. If anybody wants briefings one-on-one, again, also more than happy to do that if we need to do that.
That's
So let
really
me know.
great. And what I would just recommend, if you wouldn't mind sending out an email to everyone making that offer.
Yep.
I will ask that the chair of the ad hoc committee take a look at the agenda with our auditor so that we can spend a bulk of the discussion on that at our next meeting. All right, so colleagues, we're going to end this meeting. I just want to, we're right at quorum and we have closed session, and I know most of you have a hard stop at noon. So what I'm going to ask is that we move right into our special meeting. We're going to do a quick roll call. We have one public item, and then we're going to go right to closed session. When we go to closed session, we're going to use this room. So if you're not going to be part of closed session, I'm going to ask people to start exiting while we do two things at once. So Rainey, can you go ahead and make a roll call?
Yes, Madam Chair. Abikoga, absent.
I just asked
Blankley,
everybody to leave, so it's here.
absent. Burt,
Here.
Burt is present. Cohen, absent. Davis?
Here.
Thank you. Davis present. Dan?
Here.
Dan is present. Foley? Here. Thank you. Foley is present. Jane?
Here.
Jane is present. Kamei? Absent. Lee is absent. Lee Eng? Absent. Mahan?
Here.
Thank you. Mahan is present. Montano?
Here.
Thank you. Montano present. Rennie? Absent. Torres is absent. Turner? Absent. Lopez is absent. Chairperson Chavez?
Thank you. And
You have a quorum.
we have a quorum. Good. That was the magic word. Suds?
City group, we have Omar and Carmen already here. So do I count?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You still have 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
If you don't count Suds?
No, we did not count him.
Oh, yeah.
So we
Okay,
still have an
good.
open session before we go to. closed
Yeah,
session.
thank
So
you.
we're good.
So do I need to leave?
No,
No, you're fine right now. So, yeah, I'll just sit there. For closed session, you might have to.
Okay, we have cameras in this room, so we can't do closed session.
We're just doing it here in the back. We're doing the open.
Because we
session.
cannot turn the cameras off?
We might be heard by the folks in the back there.
Move them. Like, honestly, you
Okay,
guys,
all
let's just,
right,
I know we, sorry to be so imperious today. That's like, all right, Jim.
Yes, ma'am. So under orders from our leader, I'm going to keep this very brief. The issue of we're asked to inform you on is SB 1031, which regards a regional measure to provide funding and a whole lot of other things for transit operators in the Bay Area. Suffice to say, we had meetings in Sacramento on Tuesday and Wednesday. At the Tuesday meeting of Senate Transportation, they made changes to the text of the bill. And on Wednesday, we had the meeting at Revenue and Taxation, where they also indicated that the additional changes would be made, but we have not yet seen what those additional
Jim, could you
changes
just
are.
explain
We will
the
be,
timeline?
yeah, we will be discussing this in greater detail at your board meeting, and you'll be asked to make a decision regarding VTA's position.
But the next meetings are, it's going back to,
It's going to Revenue and it's going to Senate Appropriations, and right now, their next meeting is on the 29th, but I know for a fact that they have not finished writing up the bill, so I doubt they'll make it.
got it. And so colleagues, the only thing I'm going to add is that our voices have been heard. Senator Cortese has been very firm about return to source and making sure that there's not a threat to our TDA money at a regional level. There's still a concern about STA, the length of the overall bill, how much would be returned to source. And so what I would just say is that at the board meeting, I am going to ask for a deeper dive into this, because I do think we need to be very concrete about what we will and won't accept. And what I'm going to ask staff to have for us is those things that must be met in order for us to be able to respond. And the one thing I think I just want to really emphasize what Jim and the staff would be telling us is that this is happening so at the last minute that we're not going to get, normally we would want something complete and replete with information 72 hours before our board meeting. We will be getting things that day because of the state process, and we're going to be responding to that process. Is that clear with everyone? Okay. Thanks, Jim. And Jim's been amazing, and the whole Ledge team, thank you. You all have been a thorn in the sides of others. Well done.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to see if there's any public comment on this item, and then, none? Okay, I see him. Thank you, Suds. Go ahead.
I heard that it passed some vote recently in the Senate, did it?
Okay, in Senate Transportation and in Senate Revenue and Taxation, both of those committees passed it on. Neither one was unanimous, and in each case, the chair of those committees indicated to Senator Wiener that they were passing it along for discussion on his assurance that there would be further modifications to the bill.
And let me just say, the displeasure of those chairs is partly why there's so much discussion right now, because even though they passed it, they were very grumpy. So, all right.
Question. When do we expect to see the next markup?
I think what I was just saying a moment ago is that my expectation is that much of this is happening between individuals, so we will likely not see anything until close to Thursday.
Yeah.
So if we get something sooner, fine, and but what I'm saying is that I don't anticipate we'll have anything close to something we can look at or touch until maybe Wednesday or Thursday itself. So where normally I would be saying to the staff, get it to us early, they can't. So they'll get it to us as soon as they can.
We get it as soon as we can.
Yeah, thank you. All right, colleagues, we're going to now move to closed session. Please, no one move. I mean, those of you who aren't supposed to be here, you can move, but like none of my colleagues.
May I just stay here?
Yes, stay wherever you like. reportable actions, is that accurate?
Recording in progress.
Okay, go ahead, say it again.
I'm going to turn to Evelyn.
Thank you, Chair. There are no reportable actions taken in closed session today. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks all. Thanks for working with us today. Appreciate you.